Manifestation is often spoken about as if it were a mental game, a matter of saying the right words or holding the right images in the mind. But what almost no one tells you is that the real battlefield is much deeper and far quieter. It lives in the space between your thoughts and your body, in the subtle tension you carry without noticing, in the constant inner urgency that whispers that something is missing, that time is running out, that you need to fix your life before it is too late. Many people arrive at this subject not because they are curious, but because they are tired. Tired of trying to stay positive while feeling anxious. Tired of believing while their nervous system remains on edge. Tired of asking the universe for signs while their own heart feels disconnected from the process. This video exists for that exact moment. The moment when you realize that forcing manifestation only creates more resistance, and that anxiety is not a personal failure, but a signal that your internal system is out of coherence. When the body is locked in survival mode, it does not matter how clear your intentions are. Your physiology will always vote louder than your affirmations. This is why so many intelligent, spiritually aware people feel stuck despite doing everything right. They are trying to create a new reality with an internal state that was trained to expect struggle. Here we are not chasing miracles or instant transformations. We are returning to something far more powerful and sustainable: coherence. Coherence between heart and mind, between intention and emotion, between who you say you want to become and how your body feels while you pursue it. When coherence is restored, anxiety loosens its grip, perception sharpens, and opportunities stop feeling distant or unreal. They begin to feel natural, accessible, and aligned with who you are becoming. This is where manifestation stops being theory and starts becoming practice. When anxiety becomes the invisible field that shapes reality, anxiety rarely announces itself as fear anymore. In many people, it has evolved into something far more subtle and socially acceptable. It hides behind productivity, behind constant planning, behind the feeling that resting is dangerous and slowing down means falling behind. This kind of anxiety does not scream, it negotiates. It convinces you that you must stay alert, stay prepared, stay mentally ahead of every possible outcome. Over time, this vigilance becomes so familiar that it feels like personality rather than a state. And once anxiety becomes identity, it stops feeling like something you experience and starts feeling like who you are. From a physiological perspective, this state creates a powerful internal environment. The nervous system remains biased toward anticipation, the heart rhythm becomes irregular, and the mind stays locked in projection. Even in moments of silence, the body behaves as if something is about to happen. This is where manifestation quietly breaks down, not because desire disappears, but because the body is no longer available to receive anything new. It is too busy preparing for impact. When survival becomes the dominant internal language, the future is interpreted through threat rather than possibility. What makes this especially confusing is that anxiety often disguises itself as intuition. Thoughts feel urgent, convincing, and emotionally charged, which gives them an illusion of importance. The mind scans the future for problems and calls it wisdom. It rehearses loss and calls it realism. Over time, this internal rehearsal trains perception itself. You begin to notice obstacles faster than openings, delays faster than movement, rejection faster than invitation. The world does not necessarily change, but the filter through which you experience it does. And that filter quietly becomes the field through which outcomes emerge. The deeper issue is not that anxiety blocks manifestation, but that it replaces presence. Manifestation at its core requires availability. Availability to notice, to respond, to choose, to move when something aligns. Anxiety removes that availability by pulling awareness out of the present moment and locking it into imagined futures. In that state, even opportunities that appear can feel overwhelming or unsafe. You may receive an invitation, an idea, or a chance, only to feel an immediate tightening inside. The body hesitates, not because the opportunity is wrong, but because expansion feels unfamiliar. This is where many people unknowingly sabotage themselves. They believe they are failing to manifest because nothing is happening, when in reality something is happening internally. The body is resisting unfamiliar territory. Growth, abundance, connection, and visibility All require a nervous system that can tolerate openness. If your system has learned that openness leads to disappointment, judgment, or loss, it will default back to control. Control feels safer than possibility, even if it is limiting. Anxiety also creates a distorted relationship with time. Everything begins to feel delayed or urgent at the same time. You feel behind, yet rushed. You feel pressured, yet stuck. This internal contradiction generates frustration, and frustration feeds the belief that something is wrong with you. That belief then becomes emotional fuel for the same anxious state you are trying to escape. It is a closed loop, and many people stay trapped in it for years without realizing that the loop is not mental, but physiological. When the body remains in a low-grade stress response, it becomes highly efficient at maintaining the familiar. Familiar does not mean pleasant, it means predictable. Even struggle can feel safer than uncertainty. This is why people often return to old patterns just as change begins to materialize. It is not a lack of desire, it is a lack of internal permission. The system does not yet recognize the new state as safe. Understanding this changes everything. Anxiety stops being an enemy and starts becoming information. It reveals where coherence is missing. It shows where intention and internal state are out of alignment. Instead of asking why manifestation is not working, a more accurate question emerges. What state am I rehearsing daily without noticing? Because whatever state is rehearsed becomes familiar, and whatever is familiar becomes home. This is also why surface-level techniques often fail. Positive thinking layered on top of an anxious body creates internal conflict. Visualization without regulation amplifies frustration. Affirmations spoken from tension feel hollow. The body does not respond to words, it responds to states. It listens to rhythm, breath, and emotional tone. If the internal rhythm says danger, no amount of mental instruction will convince it otherwise. Anxiety then becomes a kind of internal weather system. It colors perception, shapes reactions, and influences decisions long before conscious choice appears. And just like weather, it cannot be argued with. It must be understood, regulated, and gently redirected. When that redirection begins, something subtle but profound shifts. The future stops feeling like a threat to survive and starts feeling like a space you are allowed to enter. This chapter matters because it reframes the entire journey. Manifestation is no longer about forcing outcomes or proving worthiness. It becomes about restoring internal conditions that allow life to meet you halfway. When anxiety loosens even slightly, the nervous system exits constant defense. Presence returns in small, almost unnoticeable ways. You respond instead of react. You listen instead of brace. You move without the weight of urgency. And in that quieter state, reality begins to reorganize itself around a system that is finally coherent enough to receive it. Heart coherence as the missing bridge. Between intention and reality, there is a quiet intelligence within the human system that operates long before thought forms language. It lives in rhythm, in timing, in the subtle communication between breath, heart, and nervous system. When this intelligence is disrupted, life feels fragmented. Intentions feel sincere, yet results feel inconsistent. Desire exists, but direction feels unstable. This is where the idea of heart coherence becomes essential, not as a mystical concept, but as a physiological and emotional state that determines how reality is interpreted and engaged with. The heart is not simply a pump reacting to mental commands. It generates patterns, sends signals, and influences the entire internal environment. When emotional states fluctuate rapidly, the heart rhythm becomes chaotic. This chaos is not dramatic. It is subtle, irregular, and persistent. Over time, it creates a background sense of unease that many people mistake for intuition or motivation. In reality, it is internal noise, and noise distorts clarity. When coherence begins to form, something fundamental changes. The heart rhythm smooths out, the nervous system shifts away from constant alert, and the mind naturally slows its compulsive scanning of the future. This does not happen because thoughts are controlled, but because the body no longer needs to search for threats. Safety becomes internal rather than conditional. In this state, awareness settles into the present moment without effort. Attention becomes stable, and perception widens. What is often misunderstood is that coherence is not an emotional high. It does not feel euphoric or dramatic. It feels grounded, neutral, and quietly focused. Many people initially overlook it because it lacks intensity, yet this neutrality is precisely what allows discernment to return. When the emotional field stabilizes, decisions stop being reactive. Responses become proportionate rather than exaggerated. Life begins to feel manageable again, not because circumstances change instantly, but because the internal lens through which they are viewed becomes clear. This clarity has direct consequences for manifestation. When the system is coherent, intention stops competing with fear. The body no longer sends mixed signals. There is alignment between what is imagined, what is felt, and how one shows up in the world. This alignment creates consistency, and consistency creates trust. Trust within the self translates into trust in interactions, conversations, timing, and opportunities. People often describe this shift as things flowing more easily, but what is actually happening is reduced internal friction. Incoherence, by contrast, produces fragmentation. One part of the system wants change, another braces for disappointment. One part reaches forward, another pulls back. This internal tug-of-war drains energy and attention. Even when opportunities arise, they can feel overwhelming or ill-timed. The body hesitates, the mind overthinks, and momentum dissolves. Coherence resolves this conflict not by choosing one side, but by synchronizing the system into a single, unified response. Another critical aspect of heart coherence is its relationship with emotional memory. The body remembers past experiences not as stories, but as sensations. When similar situations arise, the body reacts before the mind understands why. This reaction often manifests as anxiety, doubt, or urgency. Coherence softens this reflex. It creates enough internal stability for new experiences to be met, without immediately being filtered through old emotional templates. This is how the past loosens its grip without being suppressed or denied. In a coherent state, imagination functions differently as well. Instead of becoming a tool for escape or fantasy, it becomes a space for rehearsal that feels safe. Visualizing outcomes no longer triggers tension or impatience. It feels exploratory rather than demanding. This subtle shift changes the emotional tone associated with desire. Wanting no longer implies lack. It becomes an extension of presence rather than a reaction to emptiness. Time perception also transforms. When coherence is present, the constant sense of rushing diminishes. Moments feel fuller, decisions feel timely, and patience emerges naturally. This patience is not passive, it is attentive. It allows opportunities to be recognized without forcing them. It allows action to arise from readiness rather than pressure. Many people describe this as being in sync with life, yet the synchronization begins internally, not externally. What makes heart coherence particularly powerful is its cumulative nature. Each moment of internal alignment reinforces the next. The system learns that stability is possible and safe. Over time, this becomes the new baseline. Anxiety may still appear, but it no longer dominates. It becomes a passing signal rather than a governing force. And as this baseline stabilizes, the kinds of experiences that match it naturally increase. Manifestation from this perspective stops being about attracting specific outcomes and becomes about maintaining a state that allows meaningful outcomes to occur. The focus shifts from control to congruence. When internal rhythms align, external circumstances begin to reflect that order. Not perfectly, not instantly, but consistently. Life responds not to urgency or force, but to coherence. This chapter marks a turning point because it reframes the heart as a regulator rather than a symbol. Coherence is not something to achieve. It is something that emerges when the system is no longer divided against itself. In that unified state, intention gains weight, presence gains depth, and opportunities feel less like interruptions and more like natural extensions of who you are becoming. Identity, intention, and the state. You quietly rehearse every day. Beneath every intention lies an identity, and beneath every identity lies a pattern that has been repeated so many times it feels natural. Most people believe they are manifesting from desire, but in truth they are manifesting from familiarity. The system does not prioritize what you want most. It prioritizes what it knows best. This is why change often feels fragile at the beginning. The moment something new starts to form, an old internal reference point activates, reminding the body how things have always been. The pull back toward the familiar is not sabotage, it is conditioning. Identity is not a story you tell yourself consciously. It is a set of expectations stored in posture, tone of voice, emotional reactions, and micro-decisions. It is revealed in what feels possible without strain and what feels risky without clear reason. When intention is formed without addressing identity, it floats above the system like an idea without gravity. It may inspire, but it does not reorganize behavior. And behavior, sustained over time, is what shapes outcomes. This is where many people experience confusion. They feel sincere when they set intentions. They visualize, reflect, and imagine new possibilities. Yet when the moment arrives that requires presence, consistency, or visibility, something inside tightens. The body hesitates. The mind finds reasons to delay. This hesitation is not a lack of alignment. It is alignment with an older identity that learned to associate safety with restraint. The system defaults to what has kept it emotionally intact, even if that protection now limits expansion. Identity is reinforced through repetition, not intensity. One powerful emotional experience does not redefine it. What redefines identity is the quiet accumulation of moments in which the internal state and external behavior match a new self-reference. This is why coherence matters so deeply. A regulated, coherent state allows the system to tolerate new behaviors without triggering collapse. It creates enough internal stability for unfamiliar actions to be taken without overwhelming the nervous system. When coherence is absent, intention becomes performance. The individual tries to act like someone they are not yet able to sustain. This creates internal strain, and strain eventually leads to retreat. The retreat is then interpreted as failure, reinforcing the old identity. The cycle continues, not because the intention was wrong, but because the internal state could not support it long enough to become familiar. Another subtle aspect of identity is how it shapes perception of opportunity. Two people can encounter the same situation and experience it completely differently. One sees possibility, the other sees pressure. One feels invited, the other feels tested. This difference is not intellectual, it is emotional. Identity determines what the body expects from life. If the expectation is struggle, ease feels suspicious. If the expectation is disappointment, hope feels naive. These expectations operate quietly, beneath conscious awareness, guiding responses before thought intervenes. When identity begins to shift, it rarely announces itself. It shows up as a slight reduction in resistance, a small increase in tolerance, a calmer response to uncertainty. These changes are easy to overlook because they are not dramatic, yet they are significant. They indicate that the system is learning a new internal rhythm. Over time, this rhythm becomes the baseline from which intentions arise and actions unfold. Intention gains power when it is supported by identity rather than opposed by it. In this alignment, desire no longer feels like a demand placed on the future. It feels like a direction that the present moment can move toward without strain. The urgency fades, replaced by steadiness. The need for reassurance diminishes, replaced by quiet confidence. This confidence is not bravado. It is familiarity with one's own capacity to remain present through uncertainty. There is also an important relationship between identity and patience. When identity is insecure, patience feels like waiting to be disappointed. When identity is stable, patience feels like allowing processes to unfold. The difference lies in trust, not in time. Trust in one's ability to respond, adapt, and remain coherent regardless of outcome. This trust changes how the future is held internally. It becomes less of a threat and more of a continuation. Manifestation often fails when identity remains anchored in the past, while intention points toward the future. The system receives conflicting messages and chooses the one that feels safer. When coherence stabilizes the internal environment, identity begins to loosen its grip on outdated patterns. The body no longer needs to defend against imagined risks. It becomes available for new experiences without constant self-monitoring. This availability is subtle, but transformative. Conversations feel less charged. Decisions feel clearer. Actions feel less forced. The individual begins to recognize themselves in their own behavior in a new way. This recognition reinforces the emerging identity, creating a feedback loop that strengthens alignment. Over time, what once felt like effort becomes normal. What once felt risky becomes manageable. This chapter reveals a crucial truth. Manifestation is not about convincing reality to change, but about allowing identity to evolve. When internal states support new behaviors consistently, outcomes shift naturally. Not because the universe is persuaded, but because the system is no longer divided. Intention, identity, and action begin to move in the same direction, and life responds to that coherence with opportunities that feel less like interruptions and more like confirmations. When opportunities become real instead of symbolic, many people speak about opportunities as if they were rare events that arrive unexpectedly, almost like rewards granted by an external force. In lived experience, however, opportunities tend to appear in far quieter ways. They arrive as conversations, invitations, ideas, moments of timing that feel ordinary on the surface, but carry potential beneath them. What determines whether these moments are recognized and sustained is not luck, and not even talent, but the internal state through which they are encountered. Opportunities are less about arrival and more about reception. When the internal system is fragmented, even genuine opportunities can feel threatening. Expansion requires energy, presence, and a willingness to be seen. If the body is accustomed to contraction, visibility feels unsafe. If the nervous system associates movement with loss of control, choice feels overwhelming. In this state, the mind looks for reasons to hesitate. It questions timing, motives, and outcomes. What could have become a doorway quietly closes, not because the opportunity disappeared, but because the system was not ready to engage with it. This is where coherence plays a decisive role. A coherent internal state changes how life is interpreted. Instead of scanning for danger, awareness becomes available for nuance. Small openings are noticed. Subtle signals are registered. The individual is no longer waiting for a dramatic sign, but is present enough to respond to what is actually happening. This presence transforms opportunities from abstract concepts into lived experiences. One of the most misunderstood aspects of manifestation is the belief that opportunities should feel effortless and immediately comfortable. In reality, meaningful opportunities often arrive with a degree of discomfort. They challenge existing self-concepts and require adaptation. The difference in a coherent state is that discomfort does not automatically trigger withdrawal. It is experienced as intensity rather than threat. The body remains engaged instead of shutting down. This engagement allows learning, adjustment, and growth to occur in real time. Another subtle shift occurs in how timing is perceived. In anxious states, timing is experienced as pressure. Everything feels late or urgent. Decisions feel rushed or endlessly postponed. In coherent states, timing feels contextual. There is a sense of sequence rather than panic. One moment leads naturally to the next. This does not eliminate uncertainty, but it reduces the sense of being chased by it. Opportunities are met with curiosity instead of fear, and curiosity keeps the system open. Opportunities also require follow-through. Many people encounter openings, but struggle to sustain engagement long enough for something concrete to develop. Initial enthusiasm fades, doubt resurfaces, and old patterns reclaim control. This is not a moral failing, it is a reflection of internal capacity. Sustaining opportunity requires emotional regulation, consistency, and tolerance for imperfection. Coherence supports these capacities by stabilizing the internal environment. When the system is regulated, effort does not feel draining. It feels directional. There is also an important relational aspect to opportunities. Most meaningful openings involve other people. Conversations, collaborations, invitations, and recommendations all depend on presence and responsiveness. Incoherent states distort these interactions. Anxiety pulls attention inward, making it difficult to listen fully or respond authentically. Coherence restores outward attention. It allows genuine connection to form, which increases trust. Trust over time creates pathways that no amount of visualization can replace. As coherence becomes familiar, identity continues to evolve. The individual begins to see themselves as someone who can handle momentum. This self-perception changes behavior subtly but consistently. Commitments are honored. Communication becomes clearer. Boundaries become steadier. These shifts may seem minor, but they compound. Opportunities tend to cluster around reliability, clarity, and emotional availability. Not because these qualities are rewarded by some external rule, but because they make interactions smoother and outcomes more predictable. It is also important to recognize that not every opportunity is meant to be pursued. Coherence enhances discernment. Instead of reacting to every possibility, the individual can sense alignment without urgency. Some invitations are declined without guilt. Others are accepted without overthinking. This selective engagement prevents burnout and reinforces self-trust. The system learns that it can choose without collapsing into fear or regret. In this state, manifestation becomes less about attraction and more about participation. Life is no longer something that happens to you or something you attempt to control from a distance. It becomes a dialogue. You respond, adjust, and remain present as events unfold. Opportunities become real because you are real within them, not projecting yourself into an imagined future or retreating into old defenses. Over time, this way of engaging with life reshapes expectations. The future no longer feels like a test to pass or a threat to survive. It feels like a landscape you are equipped to navigate. Anxiety may still arise, but it no longer dictates direction. It becomes background noise rather than a command. The system has learned a new baseline: coherence, presence, and steady engagement. This chapter completes an essential arc. Opportunities are not signs meant to be decoded, nor prizes meant to be earned through struggle. They are intersections between internal readiness and external conditions. When coherence stabilizes the internal state, those intersections become more frequent and more meaningful. Manifestation, in this sense, is not about bending reality, but about meeting it fully with a system capable of recognizing, receiving, and sustaining what arrives. What this journey ultimately reveals is that manifestation is not a distant concept reserved for moments of inspiration or faith, but a lived process shaped by the state you return to every day. Anxiety was never the enemy, nor was it a sign that something was broken within you. It was a signal that your system learned to survive by anticipating, controlling, and bracing for impact. Coherence did not arrive to erase that history, but to soften it, reorganize it, and gradually release its grip on your present moment. Throughout this path, one truth becomes clear: reality responds less to what you wish for and more to what you are available to sustain. When heart and mind move in different directions, effort increases and clarity fades. When they synchronize, life begins to feel less like resistance and more like dialogue. Opportunities stop appearing as distant symbols and start showing up as practical, tangible moments you can actually engage with, not because the world suddenly changed, but because your internal environment did. This is not about perfection or constant calm. It is about learning to returning to presence when the mind rushes ahead, returning to coherence when the body tightens, returning to yourself when old patterns attempt to reclaim authority. Each return rewrites the baseline from which you operate. Over time, this baseline becomes familiar, and what once felt like effort becomes natural. Manifestation, then, is no longer an act of force. It becomes an expression of alignment. Anxiety loses its power to dictate your future, not because it disappears, but because it no longer defines your identity. In that space, intention gains weight, action gains stability, and life responds with opportunities that feel earned not through struggle, but through coherence. The real shift happens when you stop asking when things will change and start recognizing how much has already shifted within you. That recognition is quiet, but it is the foundation upon which sustainable transformation is built. Before this video ends, consider this carefully. If your internal state is shaping your future more than your thoughts ever could, what kind of future are you rehearsing right now without realizing it? If this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel so you stay connected to content that deepens this work and supports real, grounded transformation. And keep watching on the final screen, where the next video continues this journey into alignment, clarity, and conscious creation.